Here we are interviewing the Eagles in the Intercontinental Hotel. And we're surrounded. The first thing I have is this, the Dynamics, early 1960s, right?
Yeah, that was a local band in Nebraska.
Anybody else in it of any note?
No.
Well, they all just vanished and gave up?
They're still playing back there. They're still together.
I see. And it was all happening in Nebraska, so you moved to Colorado, right, in 64, yes?
Yeah, we did a talent contest over there.
Talent contest, oh.
Yeah, Battle of the Bands.
You won.
And I joined up with the Soul Survivors. They were a Denver group. They were doing pretty well.
Which was with those people who were with you in Ricky Nelson's band later?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it was the same members.
And they became the Poor?
Right.
Okay. That wasn't. Could you tell the story of these two obscure singles on York then?
You know what happened with them, right?
Well,
yeah,
how
nothing.
Did you come to make them? Just really.
We signed a contract with Charlie Green and Brian Stone, and made a couple of records and put them out, and nothing happened.
Just as easy as that.
Yeah, that's right.
Sold a lot in Denver.
Yes, Ricky Nelson said they were hits in Denver. Was that?
No, I don't think they were hits anywhere.
Oh. I'm sorry. Then,
It's all right.
the next thing you got into was Poco. How did you come to hear about Poco being formed?
Through our road manager, who came out with us from Denver after we were in LA for a while. He quit because we didn't have any money, and there was nothing for him to do. So he joined the Buffalo Springfield, and when they broke up, he knew the guys, and he knew that we weren't doing much. And so he asked me to audition for Poco, and I auditioned and got the job.
It was rather strange, wasn't it, that there was the rival Colorado band to the Poor was Booneseye Creek, and half of Poco was from Booneseye Creek as well.
Yeah, George and Rusty were from Booneseye Creek.
So you knew them as well anyway?
No, I'd never met them before.
Oh, really?
No, I didn't live in Colorado for like about a month. You know, we just played clubs around there to make money to survive for a while in LA. Spent it in about a week.
You weren't with Poco very long, and one hears the story that you and Jim Messina weren't the best of friends. Is this about the size of it?
Well, I'd hate to say not best of friends, but it just, everything was working fairly smooth until we got into the studio. And Jimmy and Richie had been making records longer than I had, or George or Rusty. And I demanded that I would be there for the mix, the final mix, and I was told I couldn't be there. So I left.
You decided not to swallow your pride, eh?
Yeah.
But, and then it was Rick Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band.
Yeah.
Almost immediately afterwards.
Yeah, it was real soon because I was getting ready to move back to Nebraska. And I think it was through Miles Thomas, the same person that got me the job with Poco.
Had Alan Kemp and Pat Shanahan already joined Rick Nelson by the time you did, or?
No, I was offered the job, and then I got Alan and Pat, all the
see.
guys that I came out with to form the band for Rick.
Right. And you made the live album, the in-concert album, which...
Yeah, the Troubadour.
Right. And then you left again. Why was that?
No money. It was the same thing. My wife was living in Nebraska, and we were having more children. We have 3 children now. And I wasn't making enough to really get back and see him or making it in the music industry. So I decided I would give up the music industry and work in Nebraska.
In the John Deere tractor factory, is
Right.
this right?
No, I was a parts man for the farmers back there. They came in and needed parts for their tractors and combines and things, and I'd go back and get them a part. Sometimes the wrong one.
Was this a rewarding occupation?
Yeah, very much so. Because here I am.
Yeah.
That was like a turning point for me. Just realizing that I really, what I wanted to do. And with a lot of luck,
You then rejoined Ricky Nelson?
Yes, he still was having trouble with bass players. for some reason 8 months later, and he wanted to play a gig in San Francisco. So I went out and quit the job and was trying to get another group going at the time called Gold Rush.
Really?
Some other guys that I'd met. There was a college in Nebraska for a while, and these people were from Pennsylvania and New York.
Who
and
were
we
they?
formed Steve Love and Dan Rossi, and
Steve Love replaced you in the Stone Canyon Records.
yeah, we went out together, and we were trying to get this group going while I was playing with Rick,
Yeah.
and that didn't work out. And then from there on, I played with Glenn and Don behind Linda.
Asked by John Boylan. Yes.
John Boylan. Right. And that's how we met up. And the rest of it's down there.
Right. When does an album made with Matt Gaden come into it?
Oh, this was just last time we were in Miami. Matt
that's
Gaden
recent.
was making an album down there, and I went and sang a couple of things.
All right, I'm sorry I've got that out of order. I only heard about it yesterday.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to work with.
Right. Okay, well that's fine with you.
Okay.
Glenn.
Hey, listen, John. I just wanted to make a suggestion, just on our behalf. Well then,
I want to hear this. I want to hear this.
I'm from Mars,
Mars Detroit.
and I came here just yesterday.
Could you explain your vague connections with Bob Seger?
Oh yeah, well they're not in any ways vague connections. Actually, we were real good friends while we were both living in Detroit. This is when I was when I was 18. About when I was 18, he was a little older than I was, and he was managed by the guy who ran this string of clubs in Detroit called the Hideouts. And so the big ambition for a local band in Detroit at a high school level was to get to play one of these 3 clubs called the Hideouts in the suburbs. And as we got, finally we auditioned and got a job at one of these clubs, then I met Bob Seger. And, you know, like it says in Pete Frame's thing, you know, he kind of liked me, I guess, and he let me watch him record and even let me play on a couple of songs and sing a little background vocals.
You're on Ramblin' Gamblin' now, aren't you?
Yeah. I played acoustic guitar and sang backup on that.
Uh-huh.
You don't hear much acoustic guitar in that record. They mixed it down.
You don't hear much acoustic guitar in any Bob Seger record. Really? I then read that you moved to California in pursuit of your girlfriend. Is this strictly accurate?
Yeah, she was a singer, and she sang with a couple other girls in Detroit, and they went out to California to make their way in the music industry actually before I did. And after writing to my girlfriend for a while and staying back in Detroit, I decided I wanted to move out there and be with her.
Mm-hmm.
Jade, you want me to go on this bit?
Well, no, I wonder what happens to the girlfriend and her 2 partners.
Oh, they're still in Los Angeles, singing backup and trying to write songs and stuff like that. Probably the most interesting thing about that situation was that I met John David Souther the first day I was in Los Angeles because he was going out with my girlfriend's sister. So the first night I was in L.A., I met J.D., and that was the start of a lifelong friendship.
And the start of Long Branch Penny Whistle.
Yeah.
Which was which? Were you?
Well, we never divulged that secret while we were together, so we decided we'd never.
How did you get involved with Jimmy Bowen then?
Boy, I don't know.
Well,
I guess he had a label deal. John David knew some people from Texas. We were, we're just struggling around in L.A. We don't really know, who to go to or who to see. So he just happened to be someone who John David knew of through some other people. Very kind of nebulous thing. I don't really know how I ended up over at Amos Records.
You had some very heavy dudes backing you up on that album, though, didn't you?
Yeah, we wanted to play with all these real good guys, James Burton and Ry Cooder and Larry Knechtel and Joe Osborne and Jim Gordon, and we even got Doug Kershaw to play on one thing. But in order to do that, we couldn't hire them and do one song a night with them to make the album like we would make an album now, maybe, and try to cut one track. So we had to cut the whole album in 2 days with those guys. So it was really like we work up the song and cut it in about an hour and a half, and then we go on and do the next song.
You're obviously not highly delighted with the record.
No, I'm proud of my past. I mean, it's not a great record, and the songs aren't great, and the performances aren't great. But it's something I did. I feel obliged to accept that as part of my past.
Yeah. And then I gather you and JD met Jackson Browne, and you lived in the slums.
Well, we lived in high style in the slums. I'll say that. I mean, it's not really the slums. It's actually the old part of Los Angeles, down around Echo Park. It's real nice, very Mexican. And we took very inexpensive flats. They're $30 a month for one, and $60 a month for the other one that two of us lived in. And we just gigged around with acoustic guitars and played benefits and tried to get drunk and meet girls and do folk clubs. That was really what we were doing. We were bumming.
Presumably the big break was meeting David Geffen at this point.
Yeah, it was actually the first time that I met him had to be one of the big turning points for me. That he definitely brought me out of the dregs of despair and into a situation where I could actually make a record or have a band.
Where did you meet him with that?
I met him at his house. Jackson Browne met him about a month previous and had told David Geffen wanted to manage and sign Jackson Browne to Asylum Records, and Jackson had been telling him about John David Souther and myself in our plans, and so I met him up at his house, and he told me to get in the band.
Right. And then you also went to Linda's group, and it all started from there.
Yeah. Then after that, I got a job with Linda Ronstadt. It was $200 a week. That was more than I'd seen in 3 years in California. And besides that, I loved her music. It was just it was an offer I couldn't refuse. I got real excited. I had never been on the road. I'd gone from Detroit to California, in a truck, but I'd never actually worked on the road. So.
Right. Okay, that's fine. You arrived just in time, Mr. Henley. You're from Texas, right? And I gather that you were involved with the Dixieland band originally.
Very briefly. That's incorrect on the paper there. That was when I was about 15 or 16. That's all that lasted, And then it was rock and roll from 17 on out. That was only very briefly in the very, very beginning.
Right. I read somewhere that you got into rock and roll by seeing the Byrds and then particularly the Dillards. Is that correct?
That inspired me, yeah. I mean, I actually got into rock and roll when my mother went to the record store one day and bought me a copy of Hound Dog. That's when I got into rock and roll.
Certainly. The group in the first rock group was called Felicity. Was it not? Was that?
Yeah, well, originally it was earlier than that. Actually, it was when surfing was popular and the Beach Boys and all those people in cars and things like that. We were called the Four Speeds. And then that got shortened to the Speeds, but we figured that was a little risque, so we changed that to Felicity. And it remained Felicity until about 1969, and then we changed the name to Shiloh, but it was basically the same people. Mm-hmm. It was people that I grew up with in my hometown.
Yeah. You also moved to LA to make it rather like Randy to...
yeah, same thing.
Mm-hmm. And you also got involved with Amos.
Unfortunately, yes. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I guess.
Was it as nebulous as Glenn's involvement with Amos, that you didn't know anybody else? And
Right. Well, actually, the way I got into it was through a fellow named Kenny Rogers, who used to be the leader of a group called the First Edition. And we met him in Texas in 68 or 69, and he took an interest in us, and we kept in touch by phone for about a year and a half, and finally we went out there and he produced a record for us, which was on Amos because he was affiliated with Jimmy Bowen, who was the president of Amos at the time. And so we made one single and one album.
which are collector's items, just like Long
Are they?
Penny Whistle.
God, it's awful. It's an awful album. Don't buy it.
Shiloh, I gather, split up when Al Perkins was weaned away to join the Burritos. Is that about the size?
Yeah, that's not totally the reason that we split up. The reason that we split up was because, well, for several reasons. We weren't getting any work, and we didn't have any management to speak of. And of course, the record company was not doing much either, and the record wasn't everything was wrong. And so Al left first, and I was thinking about leaving at the time, but I didn't know where I was going to leave to. But Al left first, and then I met Glenn, and then I left, and it sort of fell apart after that.
I mean, Don was the lead singer of Shiloh, essentially. So I would say that the band probably broke up when you left.
Yeah.
Rather than when Al Perkins left.
Yeah.
Right. All the members of Shiloh have gone on to do something significant, I think, or relatively so, haven't they?
Yeah, I suppose so. Some of them, anyway, not all of them. I don't know what Al Perkins is doing nowadays. He was in the Burrito Brothers for a while, and then he was in Manassas. But he's a very religious person, so he had kind of what I refer to as a God rock group the last time I heard about him, and I really haven't seen him in quite a while. I don't know what he's doing. But Jim Ed Norman was also in the group, and he is over here with us now. He's around here somewhere in the hotel. He'll be conducting... I'm not supposed to... Never mind. Anyway, Jim Ed Norman is here with us, and he does the string arrangements on our albums, and he's the producer. He just produced a hit for a lady named Jennifer Warren called Right Time of the Night. He was in Shiloh, and Richard Bowden was in Linda Ronstadt's band for a while, and he was in one of Roger McGuinn's recent bands, and things like that. Michael Bowden works with Jim Norman in the studio sometimes and does session work around Los Angeles.
Right.
He played with Linda for a long time.
He was also in Linda's band, yeah.
After we started the Eagles, so he was Linda's bass player for at least 2 years.
Right. Then I read that you were hanging out in the Troubadour bar and you met Glenn. Is that?
Yeah, well, I had seen Glenn and John David a couple of times before at the Amos Records office, and we just kind of mumbled hello or something to each other in passing, and then I was hanging around the Troubadour because that was the place to hang around at the time. That was where all the musicians and people like that went to drink and talk to each other and discuss state of affairs, and I'd seen Glenn in there several times, kind of walking around all squinty-eyed. So I didn't really know too many people, and so one night he just said, "Come on over and sit down and have a beer," and he was miserable and I was miserable because he and John David weren't able to play any music because of some kind of a legal hassle because of their contract with Amos Records or something, and Al Perkins had just left my band, and I was a little bit down, so we sat there and we talked for a while, and he told me that Linda Ronstadt was going on the road and she needed a drummer, and asked me if I wanted to make $200 a week, and I said sure. So that's how that all started.
Right. Okay. Joe, would we like to come in and do your bit?
Well, I wasn't born in New Jersey. I was born in Kansas.
Yes, I've read both, actually.
Yeah.
I've actually read New York as well.
Ah,
Yeah, I read that too.
it was reborn.
One of your first bands I read was called the G Clefs.
Yes, it was.
I never heard of this one.
That was my high school band.
And you were Ventures imitators.
We had a drummer and a guitar player and another guitar player. That was the band. And we played all kinds of parties and proms and bar mitzvahs, whatever we could find.
Anything happened to any of the other people in that?
Nope.
Okay, how
I've
about...
really lost track. I don't even know where they are. They were high school friends.
Sure. How about the Nomads, then?
The Nomads was... actually, we were pretty good. We had Beatle jackets and black ties. And, I played bass in that band. And I had my little bass amp with my 12-inch speaker. And we did all kinds of English things. And Rolling Stone songs and all that. And that was it. Right up to the end of high school.
After which I gather you went to famous Kent State University.
Went to college, yeah.
This is obviously well before the Neil Young
Oh,
song.
yeah, this was 65.
Right. And the next group was called the Measles, I
The
remember.
Measles, yes. You shut up, Glenn. Yeah, the Measles was the college band. I lasted 3 semesters in college and decided that was it. And I happened to stay the summer playing the Measles downtown. And, well, 2 things happened. My parents stopped talking to me. And for the first time I was on my own and not, my parents weren't supporting me anymore. So there I was at 19 or 18, just totally self-dependent. And I made about, $20 a night, and all the beer you can drink. And that lasted for a couple years. We just played downtown all the time, and that's how I got to know everybody in Kent.
Right. And presumably you met Jim Fox from there.
Yeah, well, see, there was all these rival bands, There was the James Gang was really the rival band in Cleveland, and we were down around Akron. And then Joey Vitale was in a rival band down in Canton. And, we didn't really talk to each other very much. I wasn't friends with Vitale for a long time, because we used to try and steal each other's gigs and stuff. But the Measles fell apart. One of the guys said,
Mumps.
yeah. Yeah. He decided to go in the Army for some reason, I don't know. And the Measles just fell apart after a while. And so Jimmy asked me to join the James Gang up in Cleveland, which I did.
And that presumably was also your first connection with Bill Zimchick, if I've pronounced his name.
Zimchick.
How did you
I haven't heard that one.
Well, I mean,
Simzik.
English Polish is different from American Polish.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was that, see, I never had played lead up till then. I was just played rhythm, kind of. And I played organ on Louie Louie, and sang Don't Let the Sun Catch You Crying. That was my highlight of the evening. And so, the James Gang went to five people down to 3. And it was just instantaneous because 2 guys decided not to come. We didn't know that till we showed up at the concert, and so we had 3 people, and we just decided to go ahead and do it because we'd driven up to Detroit. And we went out as 3 people and pulled it off pretty good. And over that next year or so, I really got some chops up playing lead guitar. Because the bands that I'd always been in, the school of thought was that if you play a record note for note, that's the way to do it. And so I never even bothered to improvise or anything.
Right.
So I met Jimmy then. Bill Simzik met us through a friend. He came out and he had just signed up with ABC and he wanted to produce a rock and roll group. And so he got us a record contract for $1,700. That was what we got.
All right.
And we bought a van with that money and started playing all over. And over the next year, we did that first James Gang album,
Right. And then
which
you
was his first album, too.
Oh, really? The first one he ever produced?
Well, he had done one before with another Cleveland group. Michael Stanley was in that group.
All right.
But we were really the second album and the first thing that had any kind of recognition.
You played on that Michael Stanley album, didn't you?
No, not the first one. I didn't even know Michael then. That was 68 or so.
It's not Rosewood Bitters.
No, it was way before that. It wasn't Michael Stanley Band. It was just the I don't know, the Frump or something. Some band. The Crud. Some kind of Cleveland band.
Then Pete Townsend entered the picture, didn't he? Is that that? Brought you on a British tour.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that was just before James Gang Nights Again, I think. We played with Pete in Pittsburgh. Because our manager was the promoter of the Who concert. And he put us on the show. Just a strange combination of things. They happened to come early, you know, and one of those few times maybe a band member will go out and see who the heck's playing in front of them. I was a three-piece group, and we were heavy metal, you know, this and that. And I guess Pete kind of identified, so he kind of took me under his wing there and invited us to come over here and play. And that's right about when James Gang Nights Again came out.
I mean, was he a great inspiration to you?
Oh, yeah, it was amazing. He really talked to me a lot and helped me and introduced me to a bunch of people. And, you know, we got so much mileage off of him saying the nice things he did about the James Gang, especially over here, that we could come over and play the tour and all. You know, that was really saved us maybe a year of hard work.
Sure. After you left the James Gang, I read that you were invited to join Humble Pie as Peter Frampton's replacement.
Yeah, I was. I got a call from Steve Marriott, and I almost went, just almost went, you know? But I just couldn't swing it, and my manager wasn't real happy about it. He didn't want me to leave the James Gang at all. Yeah, and there was I was 20 or something, 21. I didn't know how to
20 or 30.
move. Yeah, 20 or 30. I didn't know how to come over here. I didn't know anything about it, and I had to do it all myself. And D. Anthony wanted to help and all, but it just didn't work. Almost, though.
So was most of your work in that period with Michael Stanley? Because you're on a couple of his records.
No, not at all. No, I just, that was much later. I was in
see.
Colorado.
Right.
At that point, about another 6 months, and I quit the James Gang just because we'd been together for 3 or 4 years, and I wanted to do something else. So I moved to Colorado and hung out with Simzik. And right around that period is when I did Barnstorm and when I worked with Michael Stanley.
Right. Is he greatly appreciated in America? Because
I don't know.
I think his records are excellent. The first two.
I haven't seen Michael in a long time, and I haven't been connected with his last 2 or 3 records.
No, right.
I think he's working his way up. He's fairly well known in the Midwest, you know, which is exactly the way we did it.
Sure. People sell his records here on the strength of the fact that you're on promotion.
Lovely.
But
I always thought Rosewood Bitters was a brilliant song.
you knew Joe Vitale from.
Yeah, from not liking each other in rival bands in Ohio.
So how about Kenny Passarelli?
Kenny, Tommy Bolin gave me Kenny's number. Tommy had played with Kenny in high school. He said, there's this guy, he's up in Canada, and he's real good, but he's nuts. And so I called Kenny, and Kenny had just had his wisdom teeth extracted, so he didn't even remember that I called. So I had to call him a week later, and he drove down in his 37 Chevy with an upright bass in the back seat, non-stop from Vancouver. He said, here I am. And I said, well, this is the drummer, that's it. That's all I got.
Was it any big problem for you getting a new record deal?
Yeah, it was. I bumped into a bunch of stuff there from leaving the James Gang. It was hard. It took a long time. And I didn't know what I was doing either at the time.
Why did you come to add a keyboard players, or various keyboard players, after the first album?
I didn't want to play with another guitar player. I couldn't find anybody that I could relate to. And, you know, I was still using Marshall stacks and stuff. Oh, and just kind of strange. Couldn't find any. I thought a keyboard would be much better.
So was it like a three-piece Barnstorm going back into the same trap that the James Gang was in?
No, not really. We had a keyboard player almost immediately.
Oh, I see. It was just the record.
Rocking Grace, yeah. Right after the record came out.
Did that all come to an end because Kenny Passarelli started playing with Stephen Stills as well as you?
No, that all came to an end because contractual things. My ex-manager had been hanging me up, and I didn't really have a manager through that whole period. And I don't know, just a whole bunch of things. The band ran its course, that's all I can say.
Yeah.
Nobody hated anybody. Then right at the tail end of it, Kenny got an offer to go play with Manassas. So he did.
Is that right? You were on the tour as well, and he was playing with both bands. He was changing his gear in the interval. And
That happened once or twice, yeah.
It's been a little busy. So then you made So What?
Uh-huh.
And
No, I mean, well, yeah, Smoky You Drink. We didn't get to that yet.
well, that was the second album with
Right.
with Barnstorm.
Right. And then I made So What, kind of, with Vitali's help, kind of not. And, well, it was, Barnstorm pretty much faded away by that point.
Was So What the first time you met the Eagles? The rest of the Eagles?
I don't know. When did I meet you guys? I met you when we were all still at GR, right?
Yeah.
I think that's when I met everybody.
Yeah.
Right
after Smoke?
I had found
Or was that?
guy to manage my affairs, and he was managing the Eagles' affairs too, so we got to know each other in the office.
Mm.
And, they came and hung out, and I came and hung out. And we got to know each other we became real good friends.
So What has a mixture of people on it of the Barnstorm people and the Eagles.
Yeah,
It's
well, see, some of the basic tracks were cut with the original players, and then over the next 6 months or so, that kind of fell through, and I got to know John and Glenn real good. I didn't really know Felder hardly at all, and didn't know Randy, but I hung out a little bit, and they helped me with a lot of the stuff. So there you see the progression there.
Sure. And then you formed another band, right?
Yeah.
For the Wembley
Yeah.
type thing.
Yeah.
Right. And the live album, of course. Where do you get the title of the live album from?
I don't know.
You can't argue with a sick
Just
mind.
in moments of deep meditation, I'm blessed with these words of wisdom. I don't know where they come from. I don't know where they come from.
Where does Dan Fogelberg fit in to your picture? You've produced one of his albums, right?
Well, Irving, our manager, knew this guy in Illinois, and he played me some songs that Danny had done. I never heard Danny before, but I really did freak on that one. I really thought that the songs were brilliant and that I could help get his brains on tape somehow. I don't know if it,
Oh, I think it worked.
Yeah, that's when I met Henley. Henley got in from a non-stop flight from London and came over to do the session on Better Change or something. He was out of his mind. And I was too, so that worked out real good.
And from there, there's you and Glenn both helped out on the Fool's Gold album, which is Fogelberg's backing group. isn't it?
Yeah,
Same sort of
you
reason.
handle that one.
Yeah.
We helped out, huh?
Yeah, we did.
No
You did it. Yes, right. You produced that hard rock and roll track on the album. I think I ended up doing 2 or 3 things on that Fool's Gold album. Those guys are real good singers. I had a good time
Yeah.
doing that.
See, right around there, we all got real busy. We've been crazed ever since. We don't have a lot of time to
Yeah.
go work with other people, and that's real rewarding. It's fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
All we can say is that we kind of helped out. Glenn really actually did. I spent a lot of time with him.
So you're not about to start producing anybody else at this stage?
I haven't found anybody yet. I really haven't.
How about your solo career? There's an album due soon, I gather.
I got about a half an album done on very basic tracks. I'm in no hurry, and I really have to say that I'm an Eagle first.
Hey Joe, I think your solo career is going great.
Yeah, it's going fine.
Are the rest of the Eagles on that record?
They're gonna be. They're gonna be.
Yeah.
We just got off a tour, and I had a couple-week period of time, so I ran down to Miami and threw some basics down, and I didn't want to say, hey, come down and help me, because it was a period of time off for everybody else. But when we get into arranging, of course, I want some vocal coaching and stuff. And Felder probably come down put on some clams. So it's going good. It's kind of dormant, and I'm an Eagle first.
Did you give any great thought to joining the Eagles when the offer was made to you, or did you just say yes?
Both.
I'd like to have seen you.
Well, you know, we had known each other for a good year before anything came down, and we all felt. I always felt that it was compatible, which was, you know, a lot of people said, "Well, how can this work?" But having hung out and known them all, and you know, worked with everybody individually on various projects, I thought it would work. There was really no doubt in my mind, and I wanted to join real bad.
You had no worries about forgetting about your solo career at that stage?
I mean, solo career is glorious and all that, but put out 2 or 3 albums and be the boss and make all the decisions and hire and fire all yourself, and the emphasis comes off the music.
Yes.
And I just wanted to take a sabbatical and go play some music, which is what I'm doing.
Right. Okay, thanks very much.
Welcome. Felder. I want to hear this.
Right.
Felder, move on in.
I'm right in thinking you're from Florida,
Yes.
and that you hung around with the Allman Brothers at some stage.
Yeah, there were a bunch of people that were in and out of Florida and South Georgia that were became later famous or pretty well known in the music business, and all the people that were out of there, like the Allman Brothers, and we were in a band down there called the Spotlights that played all the clubs on Daytona Beach and stuff, and Butch Trucks, who was finally in the Allman Brothers, was in another band that worked a lot of fraternity parties and stuff around Gainesville and the college area. So there's a lot of people that were in and out of that vicinity that became well known later down the line.
Including Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie lived there for a while. I ran into him in high school, and we put a band together there for about 3 years or so.
With David Mason as well.
Yeah, but it's a different David Mason than,
Yes, I know
than the
who
English
it is.
did.
It's the one that's with Jackson, right?
Yes, David Mason was in that band for a while. And David Mason was actually in a band, one of the first bands I was in when he was like 12. I think he was 12 or 13. He had a little Lowry portable organ, you know, that kind of folded up, had the little vibrato pedal on the foot pedal, you know, and he couldn't carry it out of his house, so we had to come over and carry it out of his house for him and stuff. And that band was called, which was the first band, which was called the Continentals, which was a pretty greasy band at the time. You know? But gosh, for junior high school, you could make, you know, some good weekend money and stuff doing that and have a good time. Stills was in that band for about 8 months at the time. And, that was years ago, about 14, 15, something like that.
This is the band that's alleged to have inspired Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Yeah, that's right. You know Tom, huh? Tom Petty, yeah. Yeah, I hung out with Tom for a while.
Yes, you taught him how to play Jerry and the Pacemakers songs.
That's right, that's right. Have you interviewed Tommy
No, I
before?
haven't. I've just read this.
Oh, okay.
He hasn't been here yet.
Sure.
He comes soon.
Yeah,
I hear about a band called Flow.
Yeah, that happened later down the line. There was a band, well, after the Continentals, I guess, the next thing that happened was Bernie hit town, and Stephen left town, and Bernie came to town, so there weren't that many people right around the general area that, you know, were available to organize another band, so Bernie and I put together a band, which started out, that lasted to be about 3 weeks because we had our first gig, and the new lead singer's mom was half a seamstress, so she made us all these little jackets, you know, and stuff, and we went out and did a bunch of gigs for about the first 3 weeks, and it had a name, the first 3 weeks name, it was called the Pink Panthers, which was, you know, typical, which later became the Monday Quintet, and I was just trying to phone the lead singer. I can't remember the first single record we did under that name, which was the first 45. I think my mom still got a closet full, you know. But that lasted with Bernie was in that band and a fellow named Tom Long, and it was a pretty big band in Florida, and we toured around the southeast there, and at the time the Beatles were happening and the Rascals were happening. They were organized and managed out of New York by a guy named Sid Bernstein. When they came through town on a tour, they heard us, and we did one of the opening shows for one of those bands, and he invited us up to New York for a club debut, which we packed it all in our van and drove straight through nonstop to New York and did a debut, which ended up nowhere, and turned around and came back to Florida. And Bernie, at the end of high school, got a call from some people in Hearts and Flowers, which he knew really well, and was really longing to move back to California. And he and I parted at that point, and I organized another band called Flow, and we moved to New York and starved to death, and did the typical struggling thing and whatnot in Manhattan, which after about a year and a half and making one album under the name of Flow with Creed Taylor and Creed Taylor Incorporated, I got rather disgruntled with the progress and the attitude of it, and decided to go into hibernation and retreat for about a year and a half or 2 years, and do some woodshedding, it's called in the States, where you go out behind the woodshed and get your ass together and and then start off again. So I moved up around the Boston area, which there's Boston Conservatory of Music and Berkeley School of Music, a bunch of just freelance studios around there, and did a lot of sessions and just kind of hung out and played jingles and anything I could here and there to make some bucks and get by, and played and jammed a lot of black R&B clubs and things of that sort.
Who did you play sessions for?
Just anybody that was in town that would, hire me. Nobody, I guess, that you would
Nobody
be able
significant.
No, nobody really significant. A lot of jingles,
Not Orpheus or Ultimate Spinach or any
No,
of those.
no.
It was a bit later than that, I suppose.
Yeah, And so at that point, I'd stayed in contact with Bernie, and Bernie had, been encouraging me through that whole period of time that I was in New York and Boston, that I should relocate in Los Angeles, that seemed to be the prime music area in the United States, So I finally took his advice and packed it up and popped out to L.A. and landed there and had about $300 in my pocket and a guitar and one friend, Bernie, and that was it. So here we go again for the second time. First it was hitting New York, and then second it was L.A. and just, looking to keep plugging it to see what would happen. And out of that, I ran into a job which I was at a point of sheer total desperation that was offered to me. It was either handling that job or maybe taking a straight job, which was the absolute last resort, from a guy named David Blue. So I took the job for a while there, and fortunately he was under the same management as the Eagles. They sort of helped recommend me for that job and stuff, which really helped a lot, I got to know them and Graham Nash and some other people that were in that same management office while I was working for David, and on one of the tours where we were opening for a Crosby Nash tour, David and I were out. Lindley became ill and was sent home, their guitarist, and I subbed for him for the rest of that tour. And out of that, the response from that and a few other things, they called me down when they were in the middle of doing On the Border to do that one track, Good Day in Hell. And for some reason they liked that a whole lot and asked me to join the band, so here I am. Straight from Mars.
It can't possibly be that simple.
No, that's the way it is.
No, it can't be.
Right. Don, can we start again at
Sure.
at 1972?
1972. Sure. That's easier to remember than last week.
Really? How about the name, the Eagles?
You mean where did it come from and how
Yeah.
did we arrive at that name? Well, I don't know. For a lot of reasons. It was really difficult to find a name that didn't sound ridiculous, because at the time everything was Strawberry this and Electric that, So we wanted something simple, and we wanted something American, and then we wanted something that was easy to remember, and something with a little spiritual value. I think Glenn or somebody was reading some books about Hopi mythology at the time, and the eagle in the Hopi Indian mythology was the bird who carried man's aspirations and flew closest to the sun. And also, it sounded very American because there are football teams and street gangs and
Dollar bills.
And, yeah, we get a lot of free advertising from the government, actually, is the reason. So it covered a lot of territory. It was a name that was kind of all-encompassing, and it worked, I guess.
Sure. Is John Boylan really the man who should get the credit for putting you together?
He should get Some of it, yeah. I don't know how much he should get. Yeah, he had a lot to do with it. He was, at the time, he was Linda Ronstadt's manager, and he was also producing her records at the time, I think. And he had a knowledge of the L.A. musical pool. You know, he knew who was around and who should go together. You know, because he has a lot of taste in that department. And so he suggested. I think he suggested Randy and Bernie to Glenn. And it was a very unselfish thing for him to do, because he was Linda's manager, and by all rights he should have been looking out maybe for her best interest. But actually he did have an idea for a while that we all should team up with her and have some kind of a super group or something. But then when we told him we had our own aspirations, he said, well, that's fine, you know. And he and Linda were really, really nice about the whole thing, you know. They never tried to hold anybody back or to keep anybody around for their own benefit. So they, you know, yeah, he had quite a bit to do with putting it together.
Right.
And keeping it together.
How useful was it that you were one of the first acts on a new label like Asylum? Because Asylum was obviously going to be a happening label because of David Geffen's importance in the West Coast business at that stage, managing everybody.
Yeah, I suppose it was a very good thing. We weren't. I've been trying to remember now for weeks exactly what number in line we were. We weren't the first act, and we weren't. I don't think we were even the second or third act. I think maybe we were.
I think it was Judy Sill, David Blue,
right? Jackson Brown,
JoJo Gunn. Maybe
I think we were before them. John David Souther.
Right.
We were actually, and there was Ned Doheny. We were probably fourth or fifth, but a lot of those people disappeared a year or so later. A lot of the solo artists made a couple of albums and then kind of went away. But I think it was very useful to come up with a record company like that in the beginning, because we had a lot of attention and a lot of, you know, care as far as that thing goes. And it was a little family then. It was a very small thing, and everyone knew everybody else, and there were only like 4 or 5 people in the office. Country rock was flourishing at the time, I guess. I'm not sure that we play country rock anymore, but that's what they called it then, and we were one of the first groups to successfully carry it through to the public. In other words, the Burrito Brothers had tried and they had failed because they were a little too eclectic, I guess is the word.
Yes.
But we managed to come up with the right combination, I guess.
Maybe their image is wrong too.
Maybe.
Because Sneaky isn't exactly in the first flush of youth.
Actually, we were influenced a great deal by groups like the Dillards and the Buffalo Springfield and the Burrito Brothers, and we watched them and studied them very carefully, you know, and we tried to analyze the mistakes that they made, and we tried to analyze what happened and the reason that people didn't accept them, you know. I still think the Dillards are probably the finest vocal group in the world. Yeah, the label was that kind of label. The label leaned toward that kind of music, you know. Most of the artists were folk or country rock oriented, and it was all, like I said before, a big happy family.
Right. Why did you decide to use some songs that you hadn't written on that first album?
Well, we weren't very prolific at the time. You know, I just finished an album which took all of my songs away, and Glenn had finished an album and used up most of the material that he had, and we were still, actually, I would say we were still learning to write at that period of time, you know, and we thought it was a safer, rather than to write a few good songs and a few bad ones just for the sake of having all our songs on the album. We thought it was a much smarter thing to do, to pick some of our favorite songs and put them on the album, you know, and this had happened, you know, and I think that was a wise decision.
Well, we've said where you knew Jackson from, but where did you know Jack Tempchin?
Boy, I don't know. I wish Glenn was here to tell you that one. Jack is from San Diego, and I think we met him through Jackson. Jackson knew all the good songwriters that were around. Somehow he always has some kind of radar about what's going on and who's writing good songs. So Jack more or less showed up through Jackson somehow. I don't remember the details exactly.
Why did you decide to make the record in London in the winter?
Yeah, we've been asking ourselves that for a long time. No, there were a couple of reasons for that. Probably the primary reason is that our producer was Glyn Johns, one of your premier British producers, and he, of course, lives here. And he pretty much insisted that we come over here because he wanted to use the studios over here, because the equipment is a little bit different. And in fact, he did. He insisted that we come over here and do it here. And we thought, well, it'll be a good idea. We'll get to see London, and we'll get away from Los Angeles and all the distractions, with the phones ringing and people coming into the studio and bothering us and stuff. And we got a better perspective from this distance. When you get away from something, you can see it a little better sometimes. So it helped us to figure out what exactly it was that we were trying to do and what we were trying to write about and what we were trying to achieve just by being over here at this distance. And we were left totally alone. We didn't know anybody, and it was miserable. But it's all right now.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been snowing, and there you were trying to get those Californian sort of songs there.
It was raining a lot. I remember that. It was very cold.
You said that American studios British studios were different, and you implied better. Did you mean better?
No, I didn't mean to imply anything. I didn't think I implied anything. No, they're just different. The meters are different, for one thing. The controls are a little different. I mean, they all work on the same principle, obviously, but some producers just prefer different kinds of equipment. It's not that one is any better than another. It's just a matter of taste, and it's a matter of knowing how to use a room. A producer plays a room like an instrument, like Glyn Johns would come out into the studio and move curtains around and move little pieces of carpet to different spots on the floor to get different effects with the sound, and a producer usually likes to work in one particular studio so that because he knows the room so well and he can achieve the desired effect.
And his was Island Studios at this time? It was Olympic.
We did the first one at Olympic.
Olympic, yeah.
Over in, what is it, Barnes?
Yeah, that's right. Barnes. There's a track that you must have recorded at those sessions which has never appeared except on a single. Isn't that? It's called Get You on My Mind.
Get You in the Mood.
Get You in the Mood.
Yeah, that's Glenn's song.
Why didn't it go on the album?
Anybody remember why it didn't go on the album?
Y'all listen to it.
I don't know. I think the general consensus was that it wasn't... I hear Glenn. Maybe he can tell you. Come here. Got a question for you.
Yes!
He wants to know why Get You in the Mood didn't go on the first album and it was on the flip side of the single. How you like that? I don't remember, do you?
Oh, as a matter of fact, I do. It was on the album originally. Originally, the first Eagles album didn't have Nightingale.
It didn't come out like that, though.
No, it didn't come out like that. But what happened was we got back to Los Angeles, and between David Geffen and us, we decided not having just one Henley vocal on that first album wasn't right, and we decided to cut Jackson Browne's Nightingale, and we cut that with Don, and Get You in the Mood wasn't on there because it was one of the weaker pieces of material on the album. I had plenty of songs. I was singing plenty enough on that album.
It must be about the rarest Eagles track that's been released, though.
Yes, it's the only B-side we've ever put out that wasn't on an album.
I was asking Don about how you got to know Jack Tempchin, and he wasn't sure.
John David and I, when we were Long Branch Penny Whistle, went to San Diego to play at a club called the Candy Company in El Cajon, California, and Jack Tempchin was there at the club watching us that night, and he was a folk singer in San Diego, and he came up to us after the show, I think, and told us who he was and asked us where we were staying for the weekend while we were playing there, and we told him we were staying with this fella, and Jack said, "Oh, don't stay with him, he's really a drag." and then give us some bad data on the guy. And he says, you ought to come with me. I go to school with a few guys. We got a big house. We got 6 bedrooms, and you guys can stay there. And so we said, all right. And that's how I met him. And he seemed like a hell of a nice guy when I first met him, and he sure is.
Because there was some talk, Jackson said, that you were going to produce the Funky Kings album if you got the time. Is that true?
Well, I'd produce that album and several more if I had the time. Yeah, I had an interest in the Funky Kings. Myself, I would have enjoyed working with them on an album, but I didn't have the time.
Yeah. Could you go through the story about completing Take It Easy, putting the Winslow, Arizona verse in?
Jackson used to play Take It Easy in Echo Park. He lived down below of the apartments that John David and I lived up above in. We could hear him playing through the floor. And Take It Easy was one of the songs he was just, he would play. And then when it came time for him to start doing his first album, that wasn't, he just wasn't playing that song anymore for some reason. And it didn't look like it was going to be on the album. And he said to me, I think, well, it's really not finished. He says, why don't you help me finish it? And it didn't take very long for me to say yes. And so, in a matter of just a couple sittings, probably 2-3 hours altogether, we finished it up. It didn't need a lot of finishing. There's a lot more Jackson Browne in that song than there is me. But he would tell you that he could have never finished it unless he asked me, so I don't know.
Why did you decide on Winslow, Arizona?
Jackson actually blew up his car in Winslow, Arizona. He was in. We were very much into going to the desert was a big thing in 71 and 72. This was something we did every couple of months. And Jackson bought he bought some kind of old jalopy that looked real cool and packed it all up and headed out towards Arizona. Just started driving east into the southwest, and it blew up in Winslow, Arizona.
A lot of people get stranded there. It's famous for that.
It's something about the Chinese people.
There's just a bunch of Chinese restaurants there, really, and a couple of truck stops in Winslow, Arizona. The thing about hitchhiking actually happened. I was actually stranded in Santa Maria, California, and girls and guys with girls and girls with girls would just pull onto the entrance of this freeway and just slow down long enough to look at me and then keep on going. This happened for about 8 hours one night, trying to get back from San Francisco to L.A. hitchhiking. And, so that's where the hitchhiking image. We were talking about breakdowns, Jackson and I both. What's happened when you've been stranded places and such. The second verse.
Okay. The second album, Jackson also said something about he recommended that you two should call yourselves Doolin Dalton at one stage. Was that?
We thought that would be a band of desperados. I don't know, maybe he did suggest that at one time, but...
Who, me and you?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he just said something to the effect that after we wrote the Desperado album, he just said, you guys are those guys or something like that. You know, one of you guys is Doolin and the other one is Dalton or something. I don't know. He was just making a metaphor or something.
I see.
We never intended any of it that way.
Right.
More historical.
Were there some songs that appeared on the Border that were going to be on Desperado?
Yeah, James Dean. Originally, when we first got all in the room and got crazy and started talking about this whole outlaw thing, we had actually thought of an album that might be the story of many different desperados in different periods of time, and Doolin Dalton would have just been one song in a series. James Dean would have been another one. We started both of those songs on the same evening.
My Man, perhaps?
No. Graham was still alive, so that wasn't that wasn't to be written at that time. I'm trying to think if there isn't another one. It might come to me.
On the Border, perhaps?
No.
What are we?
He's asking me what other songs we thought would be on that. You know, there were a couple other songs started during the Desperado album that didn't get on record until On the Border.
Well, some of those got scrapped.
Yeah.
There are fragments of those probably over at the Olympic or somewhere.
But like I was saying, there, we originally thought about having it be all different kinds of desperados. We'd have probably written a gangster song about, Babyface Nelson or something. I don't know. Yeah, but it ultimately turned out to be Desperado. And we saved James Dean. We liked that all along and figured we'll use that next time.
Sure. You made the second album really quickly after the first one. Was that a conscious decision? Let's get all this done quickly and...
Well, we made our albums fast, but we didn't make them in rapid succession. There was still a year between our first album and our second album. It just happened that our first album took us 3.5 weeks to do, and Desperado took us 4 weeks to do.
They were released much closer than that here, I think.
Well, maybe I think probably perhaps because we didn't have a simultaneous release of the first Eagles album, and it may not have been released in London for 4 or 5 months or something.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I could think of for that, John, because it was definitely...
We rehearsed a lot for the Desperado album. We actually recorded a lot of the songs at a small studio in the San Fernando Valley, just for experimentation's sake before we came over here and recorded it. So we were well prepared for that one.
Glyn Johns just wanted you to come over here once more.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you feel about it?
Well,
mixed emotions.
It was like I liked coming to London, but I didn't like working in London myself. I felt, just to go to the studio every day for 12 hours then made me, I always felt I was missing something here. I wasn't getting the essence of London. I was just coming here and then going to work. That would have been, plus the fact that it seemed kind of absurd for 4 individuals to travel 10,000 miles one way, maybe when one individual could travel the other. But Glyn liked Olympic studios, and Glyn liked working in the English studios, and I, considering what I knew about making records at that time, I thought that our underlying feeling about it was if this is where he likes to record, we should come here.
For the next album, of course, he only recorded a couple of tracks. Was it your reluctance to come back one more time that has made you decide to perhaps change producer?
Well, it was a lot of things.
That was only a part of it, yeah. There was that, plus some little inner turmoil within the band and pressure from different places, and it was a culmination of a lot of things.
People say that there are at least 2 songs on the Border about Graham Parsons, and obviously My Man is one of them. Is the other one Good Day in Hell?
That's right.
There wasn't a third, was there? Because somebody once came up with 3.
Well, I think you could... Go ahead, Don.
Actually, My Man was... Bernie originally started writing the song about Dwayne Allman, because he and Dwayne used to be friends, and every time Dwayne would see him, he would say, "Hey, my man," And so that's where that originally came from, and then Graham died and sort of got written into the thing as well. And
yeah,
it's really both. That song's really to both of them.
To both of them, yeah.
I would add that Good Day in Hell was written while Graham was alive, and it just was a symptomatic scene that I saw at Topanga Corral, where there were just a couple of girls who were just hanging out with him because he was Graham Parsons, and nobody was telling him that he was killing himself. Nobody was a good enough friend to his to sit him down and say, "Hey, you're very talented, and you're going to waste here. Why don't you change your way of living and give us all a break?"
You said that on the first album that you hadn't got a lot of songs, but on this third album you've also used several other people's songs, like Paul Kraft. He's the guy in the Seldom Seen, isn't he?
Yeah.
How did you come to meet him? Because it's a long way away, Washington.
We didn't actually meet him to record the song. Bernie had a tape with the Osborne brothers, as in Killer Bluegrass. And he played. The Osborne brothers had a tape of Midnight Flyer, of which ours is a derivative, although not entirely the same. So that's where we actually heard the song.
So there was no connection between Paul Kraft and you at all, because
not until then. But then we met him after that, and he turned out to be a really nice guy. And of course, Linda Ronstadt, unknowing to me, had also met him and was interested. She did "Blowing Away."
Yeah.
Beautiful song.
Right. Yeah. And how about Tom Waits? Was that just the publishing company saying, "Hey, what about this?"
No, he was being signed to Asylum Records at the time, and David Geffen played a couple of tracks from Closing Time for Don and I when they were still, I guess, in demo form. That's how we heard the song.
You changed it a little, but I think you improved it actually.
Thank you.
How about Already Gone? That's Jack Tempchin again.
Yeah, Jack Tempchin and who's the other fellow? Rob Strandlin?
Yeah, Rob Strandlin.
Yeah, we just, at that point we weren't opposed to recording a good song if we found one. We weren't bent on writing all our own tunes because we were still very, very busy and going through a lot of changes, and we just didn't. If we found a song that was better than something that we had, like if we needed a particular kind of song and we didn't have that song written, then we would go and find it somewhere else because we had deadlines to meet.
Certainly. And this is the time when you added Don Felder. Whose decision particularly was that? Was it the group saying?
I think Felder made his decision. I think it was Felder's decision. I think he came in and played guitar so damn good. Everybody just kind of decided. I think we all kind of decided that we wanted him.
I think Glenn and I kind of flashed on it at the same time. I think Glenn called me up or something and said, "I think we better get this guy in the band." And I said, "I think you're right." Something like that.
Because you'd managed without an extra lead guitar player before. Were you thinking of sort of widening your spheres? Was that the...
Well, the biggest problem that we had was that we couldn't do double guitar solos and still have a rhythm instrument. We were left with bass and drums, which meant either that Don and Randy would have to play in kind of a Cream-style trio, busy-oriented rhythm section in order to do double guitar work, and none of us really wanted to do that. We liked the backbeat all the time. And lots of it. So we really felt that we wanted to have a third guitar player. As a matter of fact, the guy who's now our road manager, Tommy Nixon, who helped write Out of Control, used to come on stage and play rhythm guitar in Out of Control so that Bernie and I could play the harmony solo. We thought 5 pieces was would work to some advantage just that way.
Right. It has been... most of the people that I know reckon that One of These Nights is the weakest Eagles album. How do you feel about that?
I think that's ridiculous.
Which
I
one
don't
do you
see
think?
how. I don't see. Well, there's
It was as if
that's just that's just one person's opinion. My own opinion would be much to the contrary. I'm sorry. I think it's one of the best Eagles albums.
Do you think that they've progressed in an upwardly direction all the way?
In certain areas, sometimes one album shines for one reason and another shines for another. I believe that my personal opinion of our records is as fallible as any other individual's opinion. But my opinion of One of These Nights is that that particular song, One of These Nights, before we recorded Hotel California, was the best single individual record we ever made as the Eagles. That was us able to get into more R&B music and not have it be pretentious and still have it be our own.
That album also has Take It to the Limit on there, which I don't know about over here, but in the United States, Randy always gets about a 3-minute standing ovation, which gets the biggest ovation in the set. So there you go.
Also, Lion Eyes was one of the first songs where people started relating to us as storytellers. So I don't see how anybody could think that was a weak album.
Well, perhaps it's Journey of the Sorcerer that makes them think that, because it seemed out of context with the rest of the album.
That's
a possibility. Of course, there there are maybe 1 or 2 songs on every album that I think we've created a monster for ourselves because we've always tried to make as many of the songs as possible good songs. I mean, most albums that I get anyway have about 1 or 2 good songs on them, and the rest of it is crap. And we've tried very hard to put as many good songs. I mean, we got a lot of letters to that effect, especially especially about Desperado and On the Border albums, that people said they could listen to the whole album all the way through and didn't have to skip any cuts, you know.
Right. Were the rest of you on Journey of the Sorcerer?
Yeah, we all played. We all played. Randy played bass. Don played drums. I played acoustic guitar. Bernie played banjo.
You played electric piano.
No, on Journey of the Sorcerer, I played acoustic guitar, and Felder played all of the Martin Denny Echoplex kind of.
One of these
all that
nights,
stuff.
those songs, Journey of the Sorcerer and I Wish You Peace, were Bernie's songs, and he wanted to do those songs, so he did those songs.
Yes, they don't exactly fit with the rest of the record, it sounds like to me. But
Well, that's not for us to answer.
no, absolutely. Am I right in thinking that Hollywood Waltz was some kind of precursor of Hotel California?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
That was the first. I think that was the first time Henley and I were living up on the top of this hill, where we actually had a 360-degree view of LA, and we were rehearsing up there, and we were riding up there. We had big bay windows where we could see the lights sparkling in the city while we were writing one of these nights, and we found while we were up there that we were looking at the smoggiest, most ugly days up there, but that we were also looking at some nights when all the lights were on and stuff. It was the most exciting. It was a great vision to look out the window and see all the lights of the city.
To see the ocean.
On clear days, we could see Santa Barbara. Some days we could see 27 miles, and some days we could see, we couldn't see at 27 feet, and. We started actually just discussing our romantic relationship with LA about at that point.
There's a certain thing. It's been going on for quite a while now. It's some people. Some people go around bad mouthing LA all the time, even though they live there. It's considered very chic to say how rotten it is and how crummy it is, and it really doesn't make it. And someday I'm going to get out of here.
That's the key line. Most people there are saying, "I'm here until I make my fortune, and then I'm going to move away and be happy."
And then they make their fortune and decide that it's not so bad after all.
Is the special thanks credit to Al Cooper because he was your next door neighbour up there? Because he had a house up on Sunset Plaza, which I presume is what you were.
No, that's not where we were. No. Al's a friend of ours, though. He's some kind of inspiration. He usually wanders into the studio about 5 o'clock in the morning and asks what's to eat. He's an insane. He never sleeps.
Right. After Bernie left, did you consider getting anybody else before Joe, or was he an immediate, obvious choice?
Neither.
We were even doing some stuff with Walsh before Bernie left, and there was everybody foresaw down the line an eventual departure by Bernie, and it was in the back of everybody's mind of what to do, and would we continue 4-piece or add a 5th piece. And in the meantime, Walsh had been around and jammed with us, even at London here when we played Wembley Stadium, and he and I had done a live project, that live record at Dodger Stadium, and a few other things had been going on, and that relationship had been developing. So when it reached a point where Bernie finally made his last commitment, the obvious, most logical choice that had naturally progressed to that point was Joe, and there he was, and it just seemed to kind of like all other little branches of the tree just grow into the scene.
Right.
Here he was.
We gave it a lot of careful consideration, I mean, and we looked around and there wasn't anybody else. There was nobody. And so that's the way it happened.
There was an incredibly long gap between one of these nights and Hotel California. Mm-hmm. Was that to do with getting Joe sort of really integrated into the group, or did you have trouble with material, or what?
Yeah, basically your first answer. Yeah, it had to do with getting Joe integrated into the group, because that takes a long time when you're trying to do something like that. And also the reason is because we did a tour of Japan and Australia in the spring of that year of '76, and that took up 2 months of time when we would have normally been working on a record. And for those 2 reasons, and also the third reason is that we tried harder than we've ever tried before on the Hotel California album.
We cut and recut, and we cut some songs, 3 and 4 times and edited. And just on each song, we took a great deal of time and expense in the studio for each song. And it's sort of like beat yourself, each album you sort of try to beat yourself. And then on your last one, and this one, we really went overboard to try to make it the best we could.
You don't think that you can lose some of the excitement and spontaneity by going over it?
You mean over the length of time, or
yeah,
over? Yeah. Well, I don't think. You get it to a point where you realize that's the best you can do. Like that's the best record you can make. And at that point, you quit until you're satisfied. Then you don't stop. And of course, I guess some people function on spontaneity, or on some things like Victim of Love was recorded 5-piece track in 4 hours, almost unrehearsed, and Try and Love Again was the first thing the first night. So there are some cuts on there that were done really quick, but some other songs like Hotel California took 3 and 4 attempts at doing, and Walsh's song took two sessions to get, and we just...
You don't... It's not necessarily true that you have to lose spontaneity. You can learn how not to do that. You can learn how to make it interesting every time that you do it. If you get tired of playing a track, you just wait a week or so and then you do it again. An album for us is not necessarily an exercise in spontaneity. It's more like a craft. It's more like a carving, or a piece of pottery or something that you make slowly with your hands. And it's not something you just dive in there and do. That's some people's approach to making records, but it's not ours.
A lot of the writing's done in the studio too. It goes in with a basic sketch or a little framework of stuff, and it evolves and grows in the studio. So where it grows too, you have it in perspective of what it sounds like. Instead of taking something and rehearsing it and have it perfect and then going into the studio to record it, we start basically by rehearsing it in the studio and working on it in the studio.
How long did the writing The Last Resort take, lyrically?
Forever. We're still writing it, and it's already on the record.
Yeah. I want to add what you were saying about our albums. I think our albums contain both the thought out craft in particular songs and spontaneity, because
right, it's a combination.
It's a combination of both. Like Don was saying, Randy's song "Try and Love Again," we cut the track the first night. Then we definitely were working on a couple of pieces of material over a period of time. I remember that "Victim of Love" was written about halfway through the album, and that we had all said we want another hard rock and roll track on this album. And Felder came back that weekend, right after a weekend break, and brought us that tape, and then we went and cut that song. We rehearsed it for one day, and then the next day we went and cut a little demo of it, and the night after that we cut it 5-piece live and never did an overdub on it. So in that sense, Victim of Love is very much a spontaneous piece of work on our album.
Yeah. So, how long? What about The Last Resort then? Answer that question. How long did it take to write those lyrics?
I had a couple of lines.
And then
I had a couple of lines that I'd had for about 2 years, probably even before the One of These Nights album. I'd have had this idea, and I showed them to Glenn, and so you could say basically that the lyrics to that song took 2 years or more.
Do you regard it as a major work, an epic?
Do you?
Well, yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay.
Congratulations, you've just won a free trip to California.
Oh, good. What happens here? What happens from here on? When's the next album starting?
Football season. We'll start around September or October. I think they're starting now. I find that Eagles albums begin when the other one ends. It only takes me about 4 weeks after finishing an album until I realize we have to do another. No sooner do we release an album and it begins to climb up the charts, then I'm thinking, well, how long is it going to stay there, and how long do I have? And we do have another album to work on. I've been trying to play country songs and country progressions up in my room right here now. Just trying to start an album. So I believe that these things begin just as soon as you finish one, the other one begins, even if it's just subliminally or subconscious.
But what have you got left to achieve now?
Oh, I think we have a whole lot to achieve. The big thing to get over is to come up with with a new standard, a new measuring, a new yardstick for success, or something new to inspire you. But since Joe has just been in the band for a little over a year, and we've just completed our first album, when we got done with Hotel California, we all kind of looked at each other like, this is good, but it's really just the beginning of the five of us. And it seems to it takes a year to get to know somebody musically, even if you have the right tendencies, and even if right off the bat you hit it off, it still takes. You can still nurture a musical relationship with people over a long period of time, and I believe the way Don Felder and Joe Walsh have hit it off as guitar players is something that will develop over the course of these next albums. So essentially what we try to do is really forget about what's just happened with Hotel California, or your greatest hits, or your sold out things. We try to keep looking in the future and not and stay in touch with the present, but not dwell on it, or because it's the past tomorrow. So that's essentially what we try to do. Let's forget this happened, and let's think of this next album in terms as the one we really have to do to prove ourselves. So
You still
that's
have
the
to
way we psych. That's the way we psych ourselves up to write songs and make records.
You still have to play all those old songs though on stage to keep the people happy, don't you? There.
Oh, hey, and that's
We don't
fine with
mind.
me. We don't mind at all. I mean, geez, we've sung songs like "Take It Easy" and "Witchy Woman" over and over again for 5 years. But the audience enjoys witnessing us singing those songs, and that in itself is enough to make me enjoy doing it. I don't mind doing the old songs at all.
You are your history. I mean, that's what we are up to this point, are those songs.
Right. How much of Hotel California do you play in your live set?
Quite a bit. A majority of the album.
And are you playing extremely long sets these days?
Yes. Well, I don't know what you mean exactly by extremely long, but we play.
I mean, somebody could get bored and say that was a long set.
No, I didn't mean that. I
You
meant
mean in terms of time?
We
Yes.
play for more than 2 hours.
We play for more than 2 hours. But it doesn't seem long to me, and I don't believe it seems long to the audience, because we have 4 different lead singers and 3 different guys who take guitar solos, and there's so much variety in the different music that we play that to me it still stays interesting, even though we do play for 2 hours.
Yeah. So you don't yet see what this new yardstick might be, apart from it being a progression on what you already have. I mean, there's no...
Well, here's what essentially what happens is I mean, you can't expect to outsell yourself all the time, and that's not by any means our measure of. That's not the yardstick whatsoever. In other words, it's not whether, we can sell 6 million one time, and then if we sell 5 million the next time, we failed. I mean, what we all look for in ourselves and in each other is marked improvement on an individual and collective level each time we make a record. That the words will get better. That our execution of our instruments gets a little better, that the interplay between us is better, that each individual vocalist wants to do a better vocal each album. These are just things that you strive for as a musician, and those are the things that you really have to live with. Desperado never sold 6 million copies. It may never sell 6 million copies, but I still consider that to be a successful record. So that, when I say in terms of outdoing ourselves, we're trying to just stay in, you can't go too fast. I mean, we'll kill ourselves if we try to outdo ourselves, John. We just have to make every record, try to make it a little better than the last, from individually and collectively, lyrically.
Yeah. Great. Okay.